All right, let's talk some football.
Let's do it.
You and I, thanks to you, had a chance to talk to 3-time Super Bowl champion James White.
Mm-hmm.
You two are tight. Thank you for making that happen because he was the coolest dude ever, George.
Good dude.
He was so cool.
He's a former Badger. What else would you expect?
Well, good point.
That was my favorite towards the end of talking all like Wisconsin with him. Loved his perspective coming on. I agree. He was preaching patience for Gerard Mayo because this is something we wanted to talk to him. Had to wait till after the holidays. But for him he fell for Gerard Mayo. He shared his appreciation for Robert Kraft, everything that he's done for him in his career. What I loved about James White is he's like, I just want there to be a legitimate search this time. Don't just fire Gerard Mayo and just settle for Mike Vrabel without actually looking around.
Sure.
Do an actual real search, which we'll get to that bite in a little bit.
Yep.
I just liked his takes on that, him talking about the culture, and he's like, it's about leadership, man. Like, that's how long. He gave us a timeline, but good dude, talked to us for a long time, just talked ball. He had the time. He was very gracious with us. We didn't earn it. We didn't deserve it, but he gave it to us. It was a cool combo. Let's start with the bite. You asked him a great question about the Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson. We got it right here.
James, do you think maybe because of that tie, because of, hey, it could look like I wanted Vrabel to begin with, another former player, let's give him a chance now. Do you think because of that, maybe that's an advantage to a Ben Johnson, someone who's sort of from the outside coming in? Do you think Robert Kraft would maybe lean that direction and sort of get away from the playing tree as far as bringing them in as coaches? Or do you think that's an advantage for Vrabel, obviously, because he did play?
I think potentially gives Vrabel a little bit more of an edge, but I just hope, their entire family do their due diligence, not just hand it, straight to Vrabel based off a previous relationship. I think you do your interviews, find some other, potentially good candidates that you may think may fit, and give them a fair chance. Because not to say that Vrabel won't walk in and do a good job, but I said you may get wowed by somebody else, and they potentially could be a good coach too. So just make sure you're taking all these interviews or actually interviewing legit people that you think can help.
Thank you, James.
Yeah. And hey, look, and what he's also alluding to is the Pep Hamilton, Byron Leftwich interviews, which we all said that's Rooney Rule.
Yep.
He said there's something funny going on, which, he went the nice way about it. Well, it was encouraging because we spoke to him early in the day on Wednesday. Later in the evening, Patriots requested an interview with Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions. Multiple ways about this. You talk to Aaron Glenn and that interview to see what he brings to the table. He's one of the top candidates in all of head coaching.
He's a legit
Don't
candidate.
forget about it.
That's right.
And he played 15 years. He was a defensive backs coach. He's a DC. At one point, he was a scout.
Right.
He's one of the more well-rounded candidates out there without actual head coaching experience because of that perspective he'd bring as a former scout when he was with the Jets.
Sure.
But that's a guy that, how decimated with injuries this defense has been, has had them executing at a high level.
Yeah.
And if your focus is culture, you bring him in and you talk to him about it. And the same thing, wherever Aaron Glenn ends up down the road, that's someone you bring in now, talk to him, and you remember him. Every owner has a list. And the second, if Vrabel's one or Ben Johnson's one, they'll cross off one, and the Krafts will make a new list. Because one would be whoever else didn't get hired. Then it'll be, say, Aaron Glenn, Brian Flores. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it'll go Liam Cohen. It'll go that way.
Yeah.
But I agree because my fear is that through all of this, it's going to be Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels.
Right.
Why? Well, and it's really going to be
the history.
They know Mike. They know Josh.
Yep.
And they did do an actual search.
Yeah.
The value of a full-on head coaching search is so important. The Chargers did it with Jim Harbaugh last season. They knew they were going to get him. And they did a full-on search of head coaches and general managers. They interviewed Ben Johnson himself as well.
That's right.
And they still went with Jim Harbaugh. That's information gathering in that process.
Yeah.
You learn the process. And keep in mind, the Krafts haven't done a head coaching search in 25 years. They traded for Bill Belichick and they got him.
That's right.
When they fired Bill Belichick, they just elevated Gerard Mayo. They didn't do an actual general manager search. But to James White's point, and what I shared after that, I go, I agree because you're doing a disservice to yourselves, the players, and the fans. If they just go in with the preconceived notion Mike Vrabel's getting this job, we'll bring in Ben, we'll talk to him, but it's Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels.
I actually remember, it's funny you brought up the Chargers because I remember going back to that hiring cycle. The only reason I remember this is because I did a rant at the time about how I thought Vrabel was going to get that job. They bought Vrabel in as well, George.
Yeah.
And they liked him a lot, and there was a lot of talk around those parts that they they thought Vrabel was a guy, and then Harbaugh shows up. What are you going to do? Obviously, Harbaugh is above him, and he gets a job, and the rest is history. So to your point, all these guys, if you do your due diligence, that is, all these guys should come through your building, the legitimate coaches, and interview for a chance at the head coaching job. What I'm hoping in the Patriots case, to James's point, is that, okay, Ben Johnson we know, Vrabel we know. I would love to see a third mystery candidate, we'll call it, emerge. Maybe it is Aaron Glenn. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would love to see someone get involved here, and we hear through the media that, hey, this person absolutely crushed the interview, and the Patriots are now, you have to include this person in this search.
Yeah.
It's not just Johnson. It's not just Vrabel. It's not some foregone conclusion that it will be one of those two. There is a third candidate who impressed them because they actually did their due diligence. I just, like you, have questions if that's the case or not, if that's really going to happen, or if this is Mike Vrabel's job as a layup, essentially.
Think about it, like Liam Cohen out there. He's just 39 years old.
Right.
And that's a guy that's heating up to be a head coaching candidate. Wes Phillips is the Vikings offensive coordinator. He doesn't call plays.
There's a third piece here, potentially.
And what I think is important, it's not just on the head coaching end, it's on the offensive coordinator end.
Right.
Don't just settle for Josh McDaniels, because he's had his shortcomings. Great offensive mind. He's had his shortcomings in game management and play calling. And also, does Josh McDaniels agree, or does Mike Vrabel want Josh McDaniels to be his offensive coordinator? When there are guys out there, Clint Kubiak, Thomas Brown, again, Wes Phillips, Tanner Angstrand, Nick Caley, and then on the defensive side, same thing. Christian Parker, the Eagles secondary coach, he's heating up to be a defensive coordinator candidate, where that's a guy that's learned from the Packers. He's learned under Ejiro Evero and Vance Joseph with the Broncos, and now he's learning under Vic Fangio. Like, that's a valuable interview. Don't just settle on who the DC can be. Is it a Robert Saleh, Luana Rumo, Jim Leonard that I spoke about? You bring these guys in, and whatever may change. Christian Parker now as a defensive backs coach could be a DC down the road, and that could be him as a head coaching candidate.
Yeah.
Go out and do that. And to the point. And look, the Rooney Rule, the first interviews they did was all Rooney Rule. It was sham. It was fake.
Sham.
They were doing it to check those boxes as quick as possible. And that gave me the red flag of they're doing it quick. They're going to have Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels by Monday.
Right.
The Patriots have Drake May, $132 million in cap space, and a top 5 pick. You have leverage. You don't need to rush into Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels. The Krafts, once again, have to be serious about this entire process. Don't fire Gerard Mayo just to get the fans off your back and to please the public.
That's right.
You let Gerard Mayo go because that was the right choice, and you failed. You, Robert Kraft, as an owner, you failed him. But learn. Don't just rush into the next one. Do an actual search for head coaches, GMs, and coordinators on both sides of the ball. They owe it to these people. And once again, look around at the vacancies. What do you have to rush to beat the Jets? The Saints? The Bears even? And that's up in the air. You're the New England Patriots. If Ben Johnson's the best answer, do that. If Christian Parker with the Eagles is the best choice for a defensive coordinator, make sure you bring him in and interview him and do that. And the one that was encouraging with Aaron Glenn is, and again, just be smart. What does Aaron Glenn serve? A Rooney Rule. But he's an actual candidate.
An actual candidate.
Christian Parker, you have a defensive coordinator opening.
Yeah.
He is a black defensive backs
he
coach.
is.
But he's an actual defensive coordinator candidate.
That's right.
Just for everything to talk about the integrity and all that, you make a mockery of the rule. You didn't have to. And
That's
it seemed
right.
like they were rushing again.
Yeah.
And they were more worried about getting to the end point than actually doing this process the right way.
Right.
With A, respect to the Rooney Rule and minority candidates, and also B, just rushing to get to the end point, making a mockery of it just to get to Mike Vrabel again.
That's where James was going.
Yeah.
Is like, listen, there was already rumors in scuttlebutt that they wanted Vrabel to begin with, but it was Kraft who usurped everyone. Obviously, he's the owner, and was like, no, it's Gerard Mayo. So, I in a lot of ways, if you just go to Vrabel now, a lot of those former players could feel a type of way about that. And certainly Gerard Mayo, you would think from afar, wherever he's at now, could feel a type of way about that.
Yeah.
So I know we got to get to this other bite, but I do want to ask you this because you kind of alluded to it. I just want some clarity. You're assuming, like all of us, if it's Vrabel, McDaniels likely will be the OC. But if it's Vrabel as a head coach and you have a different offensive coordinator,
Yeah.
you're happier with that. You feel more comfortable with Vrabel as a head coach with completely new offensive and defensive coordinators than maybe some faces and names we would be familiar with. Is that fair to say?
I want this to be a serious search.
Okay.
That's what I want. you bring in Josh McDaniels. You interview him. You check his interest. But like, don't just settle because it's Josh McDaniels.
Okay. All right.
Now, the one thing they can get with you get Mike Vrabel, if they get Josh McDaniels, he has ties to the area, tried to be a head coach twice and failed. Maybe they have a conversation with Josh. Hey, man, you could be an OC with Drake May, 5-10 years. You could get a couple more rings.
Sure.
But like, don't come here and then leave to be a head coach and run yourself out of town after a year and a half again.
Right.
That's a one where if there is continuity. But I look at a Clint Kubiak where that's a guy that learned from Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings and also comes from the Kevin Stefanski coaching tree.
Who I like.
Because that's really who he learned
We
under.
both like.
Yeah, it's where he got his start. And he goes from that. He was a Broncos passing game coordinator and became an interim play caller when Hackett was fired. Learned from Kyle Shanahan. And this past season, we saw what that Saints offense did.
Yeah.
Injuries kind of put him aside, quarterback, all that. They hit a wall. But look at a Clint Kubiak. Because that's a guy, again, you get him in your building, maybe that's a guy that could be the next offensive mind.
Yeah.
And he teaches them. Tanner Engstrand, he's a disciple of Ben Johnson. I want people with play calling experience, which Clint Kubiak has, Josh McDaniels has, but I want them to do a legit, thorough search.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think that's fair
All
to
of it.
ask for.